Now, believe has also been twisted throughout the years. Nowadays, when we say we believe something, you could believe in Santa. It doesn't really mean that you actually 100% believe that there is a guy in the North Pole who is like making children and visiting everybody every night. But you have this just like this belief that like, yeah, like, you know, Santa is like a good thing, you know, blah, blah, blah. He makes children feel happy. We have this word believe where we believe that like, we don't really have to let our belief in Santa affect our entire life, right? But that's not the word that we have here. Believe is not just something that you acknowledge and forget. Believe is not just something that we think about and then don't let ourselves be changed by it. Belief is an action. Belief is something that actually rocks your socks, that knocks you to the ground and makes you realize that like this is something that is going to affect not only my entire life, but my entire character. It's going to affect everything about me. So this word believe that we have comes from the original word amen. Now this word amen has to do with tent pegs. We just had our camp not long ago, and we had tent pegs, right? We had these tents, and we had to nail these pegs into the ground. However, the problem with that was where we were located at down the beach, it was all sand, right? So one of the issues that we had is that like these people hammered in our tent pegs, right? They went into the sand, but then we got this like nice little wind spell that came in, and when we visited, all of our tents were like, the tent pegs were coming out, the canvas of the tents were like pushed up, they were like blowing over. All of these things happened not because the tents were faulty, but because when we hammered into the tent peg, we hammered it into sand. Sand is very easy to just take stuff out of. When it came time to take down our tents, we didn't struggle to take out our tent pegs. We just reached down and plucked them out of the ground because the ground wasn't solid. It was just this soft soil, this soft rock. Now, we did not have this problem when we had our tents set up at Kutvik or up at Knapp Creek. Why? Because the ground that we had there was this hard, solid ground. When we went to go clean up the place, I kind of went on tent peg duty, and I took out a sledgehammer, and whenever I came across one of our big, long metal poles that were in the ground, I had to use a sledgehammer to knock them out of the ground, and then when the time they came out, they were bent. The ground was stronger than the tent pegs themselves, so when we tied the ropes of our tent to these poles, they weren't going nowhere because the ground was sturdy, the ground was solid, and that's what this amen means. You can either choose to believe and put your tent peg down in the sandy soil, but whenever life comes at you, whenever people start to question your belief, it's like the winds that begin to hurl up against our tents here down at the beach. You start to get rocked, you start to get shifted, and eventually those tent pegs, the more that the wind blows, the looser they're going to get, and your faith is going to come to this place where you're like, I'm not sure if I can keep going with this. Because our belief, our faith in God was not set in something firm. For those of us, when we heard the word of God and we believed in our hearts what God did, and we understood that this is something real. It's like hammering the tent peg into the ground up at Knapp Creek that is hard and solid and firm, so that when that wind comes against your tent, it's not going anywhere. Now, you can be inside the tent, and you're going to hear the wind, you're going to hear the rain, but you're not going to get blown away. You're not going to get wet unless you roll under the tent like my camper did one year. But you're not going to be affected by what's happening on the outside, and it's not because of how great your tent is, it's because of how strong the poles that are driven into the ground are. That's what this amen word is. It's not belief like Santa Claus and we can go on living our life like nothing happened, right? This is belief in the eternal and real life God who is alive 1 billion years ago and is alive today. It is the belief that God can sustain us, can carry us through each and every moment of our life. And when people come against you, when your job comes against you, when the enemy or when life comes against you, nothing is going to rock your belief in God. It is not going anywhere. And in fact, it can't go anywhere. Because when we have this true faith, this true belief in God, we're not hammering something into the ground. Our foundation is the Lord himself. It's hammering our life, hammering our faith, hammering everything into this firm foundation of God. And once our hands are in God's hands, he's got us. And there is no turning back. There is no taking away what God has kept safe.